I worked the night rotation at Halvern Annex 9 for 4 years, before anyone told me the woman in Bay 7 had a name. Nobody had, because as far as the continuity program was concerned, she didn't. The intake ledger listed her as Subject 7, recovered from the border collapse at 11, memory suppressed under compact protocol on arrival, held for observation ever since. Observation was the word they used. What it meant, in practice, was that a rotating shift of technicians drew blood from her twice a week, logged her vitals, and left. I was the archive tech. My job was paperwork. Chart the readings, flag anomalies, feed the numbers upstream. I wasn't supposed to talk to her. Nobody said I couldn't. They just never imagined I would. Before the annex, I'd spent 11 years as a field medic, most of it on transports where the wounded came in too fast to learn their names before you had your hands inside them. I got used to that kind of work, the kind where a person becomes a chart number for their own good, temporarily, so you can keep them alive. What I never got used to was a place that made the number permanent on purpose, long after the emergency had passed, because a number was easier to process than a person. Halvern ran on that logic the way other places run on electricity. Nobody there was cruel to her exactly. Cruelty would have required noticing her enough to choose it. The first time I did, it was an accident. I was checking the line on her arm and she was watching me the way she watched everyone, flat and waiting for the next unpleasant thing, and I said, without deciding to, that the tubing pinch would sting for a second and then it wouldn't. She flinched anyway. But she looked at me after, longer than she looked at the others, like she was trying to work out why I'd bothered to warn her about something so small. After that, I kept doing it. Small things. I told her what I was about to do before I did it. I brought a second blanket in winter because the annex ran its heat on a budget, and Bay 7 was always the coldest room. I didn't put any of it in the chart. The chart was for the program. I kept a second notebook, off the record, and in it I wrote down the sounds she made in her sleep. Fragments, half-words, nothing that meant anything to me, but they meant something to her, I was sure of that. The way she'd wake sometimes with her mouth still shaping them. One name kept surfacing more than the rest. It came out soft and slurred at 3 in the morning, over and over some nights, like a hand reaching for a ledge in the dark. I couldn't make out all of it. I wrote down what I heard anyway, Ines. Just that, at first. Later, more of it came clear. A second word trailing the first, something with a hard vowel in the middle. I wrote that down too, spelled it 3 different ways across 3 different nights, and never once put it in the official record, because the official record didn't have a field for a name nobody had authorized. 6 years she'd been Subject 7. 6 years of that ledger. And still, some nights I'd sit outside her door with my notebook and just write down what she said in her sleep, because it seemed to me that a person doesn't stop being a person just because the people running the facility find it more convenient to file her as inventory. The order to transfer her came down on a Tuesday. A logistics group with a compact resource contract wanted the annex's long-term subjects reclassified and shipped to a processing site 3 systems out, tissue and marrow harvesting, officially renewable donor material, the kind of language that lets people sign off on things they'd never say out loud. Reassignment required one last full workup before transport, lineage scan included, standard protocol, because donor material had to be catalogued by genetic origin before shipping. I ran the scan myself. I told the shift supervisor I'd handle it so I could be the one in the room. She was calm going in, the way she was always calm, the stillness of someone who had learned a long time ago that fighting the machines never changed what they did to her. I sat by the readout and talked her through it the way I always did. This part will hum, this part will feel warm, none of it will hurt. And about 4 minutes into the sequence, the display flagged an anomaly and started cross-referencing archived compact lineage records. The kind of records that only exist for houses the compact once considered worth keeping track of. I watched the match confidence climb past the threshold that triggers an automatic hold. Full royal lineage, direct line, House Cathra, a line the compact registry had marked extinct 19 years ago, in the same border collapse that took her from wherever she'd been before Bay 7. I hadn't looked away from the readout in maybe 10 seconds when she said my name. Not the machine, her. First, before the confirmation tone even finished sounding, before I'd said a word to her about what the screen showed. She said it quiet and certain, the way you say something you've been holding on to and finally decided to use. Yoren. I'd never told her my name. It wasn't on my badge in a way she could have read from the table, and I never once said it to her in 4 years, because I hadn't seen the point of a specimen knowing the name of the tech who drew her blood. She must have picked it off a supervisor calling across the bay. Some morning, some ordinary shift I never noticed her noticing. She'd carried it the way I'd carried her half-words in a notebook, quietly, on her own time. I asked her how long she'd known it. She said long enough. Then she looked at the readout herself, at the lineage confirmation still glowing on the screen. And she didn't look surprised so much as unburdened, like a weight she'd been carrying without a name for it had finally been given one, and she could set it down. The supervisor came in 20 minutes later with the logistics handler, already talking about revised manifest categories. Royal lineage donor material commanded a different contract tier, he was saying, before he'd even looked at her, still talking about her like inventory even with a confirmed name and a confirmed bloodline sitting 6 feet from him on the table. He wanted her prepped for immediate transfer under the new classification. He had the paperwork half filled before he reached the door. I told him the scan wasn't finalized. It was a lie, and a small one, and I didn't care. I told him full lineage confirmation required a secondary verification pass under the Annex's own protocol, one I was inventing as I said it, and that I wasn't releasing an unverified subject to an off-site contractor without it. He didn't believe me. He also didn't want to be the one who shipped a member of a compact recognized royal house to a harvesting facility without a paper trail that covered him, and that uncertainty bought us the room. She sat up on the table while he was still arguing with me. She hadn't been asked to. Nobody in that room had given her permission to move, which was, I understood later, exactly why she did it. She said her name to him, the whole of it, Ines Vel Cathra, clear and unhurried, the first time I'd heard her say it in full, and told him that whatever tier his contract assigned her, she wasn't shipping anywhere as material to be catalogued. She said it the way a person says a fact, not a request. He left to make calls. I doubted he'd get an answer that satisfied him before the day ended, and I was right. She stayed sitting on the edge of the table after he'd gone, her bare feet not quite reaching the floor, and for a while neither of us said anything. Then she asked what I'd done with the notebook. She must have seen me writing, some night, half asleep, thought she'd dreamed it. I told her I still had it, every page, every wrong guess at her name before I got it right. She held out her hand for it, and I gave it to her, and she read through 6 years of my bad handwriting without saying a word, until she got to the last page, where I'd finally spelled it correctly, 3 weeks back, underlined twice because I'd been that certain. She didn't say thank you, she said stay, and it wasn't a question, and I told her I wasn't planning on being anywhere else. Outside, I could hear the logistics handler still arguing into a comm link down the corridor, his voice climbing the way voices do when the paperwork stops cooperating. Neither of us moved toward the sound. Whatever he decided without her in the room to be decided about. She didn't reach for a title after that, or a throne, or anything the compact registry might have offered a restored heir of House Cathra. She reached for my hand instead, still holding the notebook in the other, and I understood that whatever came next, hearings, verifications, a house rebuilt from a name I'd spelled wrong twice before I got it right. She meant to face it from right where she was sitting, with her feet not quite touching the floor and my hand in hers, and nowhere else she'd rather be.